Another week of Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. I'm Jared Roser. He is Sam, the Hornet Spiegelman, tapping in from Austin, Texas, where it sounds like he had an eventful weekend this past weekend out in the area. Sam, what's going on, man?
Yeah, no, I'm a couple days, recovering from the wasp attack. They're running rampant by the lakes here in Central Texas, but your boy made it through. I actually saw a wasp when I got home. Best believe I hot spotted the heck out of that thing, and that's no longer an issue. And yeah, we're recovering and we're getting ready for a big week of football coming up in the boot this weekend, Jarrett.
Hotspot, that you like let it connect to your wireless internet? Is that like some sort of
Yeah, make it a more
right?
a commendable home for it to set up shop and act like make it your home.
As Sam mentioned, he'll be back in Louisiana this weekend, and we'll get to the matchup that we'll both be catching later on this week. Going to hit on a lot of topics in today's episode, most of which Sam is not preemptively prepared for, and so we'll see how some things go. But it's kind of general, bigger topics, talking about some of the big college matchups in Louisiana this past weekend that, out in Lafayette and in Baton Rouge, we saw a lot of notable talent going to take in the Tulane Green Wave and Louisiana Raging Cajuns, and then LSU hosting UCLA, talking about some running backs around the state, guys that Sam and I have talked about enough that I kind of knew he knew enough about that we could have this conversation, and that'll lead right into this matchup later this week. But talking about this past weekend before we start looking forward much, those big college games I talked about, they brought out an awful lot of talent in terms of high school recruits and whatnot. And it was games for each of those three Louisiana programs in Southeast Louisiana that I was interested to see what it could be from a recruiting weekend standpoint. And particularly that Cajuns Wave matchup as a big in-state matchup, most of those guys being recruited by both of those programs. I've been asked through the years the significance of a win like that for Tulane, to go out to Lafayette and get a win. And I've tried to explain to some radio hosts and whatnot that it's good, but at the same time, a college decision usually isn't swayed overly by one matchup. I mean, what are your thoughts on just seeing those two teams play, seeing it go Tulane's way, and what that means for those guys on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I think you said it correctly. One game does not help a kid make a decision. They don't look back at the outcome and say that the way they won this game on the field, and that's why I'm going to go play for them. They're winners. Having said that, being at a game and taking in that environment and the feeling you get inside of those stadiums, that's what's matter, and the way you're getting recruited by those coaches that are coaching those guys on the roster that you might have a connection with. That's what matters. But, I think obviously LSU is the flagship university in Louisiana. It is the only Power Four in the state. But that's always left the door open. So who is number two, right? And I think for a while under Billy Napier, UL had a really, really compelling, strong argument that they were number two in the state. They had jumped La Tech. They had jumped Tulane. And I think under Fritz, that momentum kind of shifted back uptown as they obviously went off and won a marquee game against USC and Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner, and all the success they had the ensuing year. And now under Sumrall, I think, we see, and also under DeSormo and UL, you have two up-and-coming programs again. I think Tulane going into this season with the way that Sumrall has operated since he got uptown and assembling this roster, and the way that he got this job after at one point being almost named the Kentucky coach, like in theory, if things had not shaped out the way that they did, he ends up taking the job at Tulane, keeping Tulane rather in the national spotlight as one of the best Group of Five programs in the country. Everyone is tuning into the Green Wave each and every week this season, and getting that win now, I think it kind of cements them as they are the number two team in the state of Louisiana. They have national momentum. They have regional momentum. And for good reason. Coach Sumrall is a hell of a coach. He's put together a fantastic staff. They're making waves on the recruiting trail. They're making waves in the transfer portal. They're making waves in the NIL front, all the common ingredients to a successful program in the year of 2024. and getting that win in Laffey, going on the road, and they were trailing in that game to come back and come out on top says a lot about the amount of progress they've made under Sumrall and this coaching staff this year.
You hit on another common topic that we've probably both been asked about through the years on little radio segments and stuff like that of who is the top dog of the G5 programs around Louisiana. And I think a few years back, there was a case to be made for Coach Skip Holtz and the Bulldogs for a while there before Napier and company made their rise in Lafayette. And then obviously the success that Coach Fritz and company, I think it's kind of, it would be kind of tough to make an argument about anyone or for anyone but Tulane the last couple of years, really the way it's gone for them.
No disrespect to Nichols, of course, who has definitely, but we've been overlooking in this argument.
Sure. They do a great job too. And just in terms of the pure volume of Louisiana talent that Coach Rebo and company bring down there to the Bayou. But again, it's just different peer groups that you're recruiting against at that point. And so I think Nichols, you would probably credit amongst the FCS schools as the leader of the pack for several years under Coach Rebo. They've done a heck of a job. I think Southeastern has been notably strong as well. But I think, in recent years, if you're looking at kind of in-state recruiting champs, it would be probably Tulane and Nicholls State of those respective groups.
No doubt.
And I do think there's something to be said for it's a win, a single game isn't going to sway recruits overly, and that's not what they're going to look at as a primary factor. But there's something to be said for them having seen that team in that setting and just subconsciously, okay, those guys overcame some things and won, and just sort of the level of excitement and whatnot associated with that Tulane Green Wave team when guys are, thinking back down the stretch.
No, absolutely. And if you're considering Tulane, what you've seen this season is they had Kansas State on the ropes uptown in one of the biggest games early on. They played Oklahoma. They didn't get pushed over as you would have expected them to, and now they come out on top in a big in-state battle. I think there's a lot of good juju around this Tulane program, and if you're a recruit, you're definitely liking what you're seeing on the field from the quarterback position, from the running backs, the way this defense is flying around. The receiver play has been exceptional. I think there's a lot to be excited about.
They'll have a chance to host some prospects this Saturday morning at Ullman Stadium when they have their third 11 a.m. kickoff in a 4-week span. South Florida coming to town for this home game uptown this weekend. The Cajuns head on the road to Wake Forest, a big opportunity for those guys on the road. Another topic, and I'm going to throw you, put you on the spot again with this. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these running backs around the state that some of whom we've talked an awful lot about. Harlan Berry has looked great. JT Lindsay has looked great. A lot of guys have been off to great starts this season. Nate Shepard is imploring me to ask you, how does he get a 4th star? Take me through the recruiting process. What kind of the difference is when you guys are figuring out 4-star versus 3-star, and how much can a strong senior season kind of help push a guy like Nate Shepard, who's averaging 150 yards a game on Friday nights, plus everything he's doing on special teams and defense? How much can some of these performances on Friday nights help kind of sway some things?
Yeah, no, a great Caesar salad added to any meal can completely enhance it. It adds a level of zest, of freshness. No, Nate Shepard, we need to be talking about the early part of Nate's season at Mandeville, the Duke commit. Yes, he is a 3-star, but we've talked about it at length on this podcast that just because he's a 3-star doesn't necessarily mean he is a bad football player. That's a horrible connotation to the ranking. He's actually a very high 3-star ranking because of the versatility that he brings to the running back position. We've often spoke that he is as good of a runner as he is a receiver, and that impact is very easy to see on special teams. And as Jared said, playing defense for Mandeville this year. And I think the way he's gotten off to his senior clip, not only producing, we've already seen some of the versatility and the spot duty on different positions in the offseason, and now it's the senior season eval. My big thing, if we can match the speed to the ability of the measurables we'll add in. Nate isn't exactly the most physical runner in the world. He's sub 6 foot. But he has speed, he has quickness, he has versatility. I think he's definitely with the productivity and what we've seen in these different settings is definitely giving us a strong, compelling case for a rankings bump. Where that'll be, well, will be determined. We're a month into the season. We still got a few more weeks and a few more big competitive games ahead of him. But the way he has started off this season, this is what you want to see from a running back. The way you can impact the game. It's easy to take a running back out of the game by loading the box and forcing them to throw the ball. But with Nate, it's very hard to remove him from the game plan. He's showing why he's in line for a nice rankings bump, and it's been a really strong start to his senior year that I think we're all appreciating. And Duke fans should be very excited about what's coming to town in a couple of months.
I think my answer usually to athletes or parents when asked about some of the ranking stuff is, number one, stop worrying about it so much and let that stuff kind of take care of itself. Keep the main things, and let that be kind of a byproduct of it. But there obviously is a lot of desire for guys they want to be the 5-star or the 4-star, and they want to be able to kind of add that to their resume and be able to tell people. And it's a little bit crazy to me how much young athletes talk about that, where they'll walk up to, on the 7-on-7 circuit, other teams, say, all right, who's a 4-star, who's a 5-star, and just ask each other about what their rankings are. When you're looking at kind of, all right, these are the 5-star guys, these are the 4-star guys, I wanted to let you share a brief description of what those distinctions actually mean, how many there are, because on a national scale, as much as everybody wants to be a 5-star, there tends to be 20 to 25, 25, give or take, 5 stars in the country. And so as much as everybody wants to be a 5-star, it's a pretty limited distinction. And there's also, a pretty tight window on that 4-star status as well. How does all that stuff break down as y'all do have those conversations in rankings meetings and whatnot, in terms of what those tiers look like?
Yeah, well, like you said, there's only 32 5-stars in the entire country. It's supposed to reflect the 32 first-round picks in the first round of the NFL draft. And you're talking about running backs. Running backs, if we're trying to keep up with the trends of the NFL draft, there may be one, possibly two 5-star running backs, possible first-round picks at that position that has been degraded to some degree over the past couple of years. There are the exceptions, the Christian McCaffreys of the world that are, what we're talking about with Nate. Does he fit the bill of a versatile 3-down back that can completely build an offense around? Maybe. Well, does he have Christian McCaffrey's speed? No, but is he in that 4-star conversation? Well, that's a fair conversation. Because you're talking about now running backs that be drafted in the 2nd through the 7th round. And, generally there's about 20 to 34 star running backs in the entire country. And, from Nate's standpoint, it's kind of, the ranking is giving me the same vibes that we're watching Dylan Sampson at Tennessee, where he was extremely productive. The questions about his size compared to some of the other running backs that were in the cycle or in the class, but does the speed, versatility, the pass catching, and of course the ability to run outside and break away from tacklers and run through tacklers all matters. But Nate is as the more of the all-purpose back. Does he fit the bill? And he's making a very compelling case. And now looking back at Dylan's success that he's having over in Rocky Top, it's definitely having me think that maybe the size is, we're able to overlook it with Harlem because of his elite speed. And, it's easier to come by when you look at guys like James and Jasper, who are built like tanks and, would roll over everyone in their way. But, the way that Nate and Harlem win, and the same way that Dylan wins with quickness and also speed, and having both of them, which Nate does in spades, it gives you plenty of pause, and it's a great discussion point.
I think we've seen more and more running backs too, as much as talking about the height of quarterbacks is such an annual conversation on the recruiting trail. I go back even to Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, who was just a little ball of muscle who was quick as could be and was really versatile in a lot of what he brought to the table. And he got overlooked in a lot of ways because he was a smaller back. And then the way he excelled, obviously, at the next level and went on to be a first-round pick, it feels like there's becoming more and more of a sample size of undersized backs who can excel at the next level more than what we maybe traditionally, that just some of that has shifted a little bit through the last, decade, certainly, but maybe even the last 5 years or so.
For sure. And what Clyde did, where he kind of separated himself, was he had those enormous testing times from the opening with his, had his 40 time, his short shuttle, and everything. I mean, obviously, in the career he had at LSU, at Catholic, then LSU, and obviously being a first round pick at the Chiefs. The thing about these smaller backs, it's really, like you said, it's not about how tall they are. In fact, I would actually say that height is a disadvantage. Being taller is a disadvantage for backs. It's more of, will they be the featured back or part of a committee when they get to the next level? And that, if you have the skill set like Samson had, and like Nate is showing, like maybe you can be a featured back or at least a very high touch contributor out of the backfield or even out of the offense as it pertains to their skill sets.
Another guy in that 25 running back class that we've talked about some on here, I believe, certainly talked more about off air, but who has been somewhat under the radar from a recruiting standpoint, Xavier Ford out there at Leesville. His first 2 games this season, he was up over 700 yards between just the first 2 games, 700 yards and 12 touchdowns. And so his ridiculously productive high school career has just continued right on into senior year. And I know we've kind of heard some buzz about the potential. Could he end up at Tulane as a school to watch for him? What are your thoughts on kind of Xavier, where he is at this point in his development and his recruiting process?
Yeah, no, he's someone who's been on the radar for several years as a part of this really impressive and deep group of backs out of Louisiana. And Xavier has family ties to former LSU back Michael Ford, and he plays very similarly. I mean, he's a tough runner. He plays for a Leesville squad that pounds the rock. They play a physical brand of football. They lean on Xavier week in and week out, and he's able to shoulder that workload a lot like a JT Lindsay is at Alexandria. They're kind of built in those same that part of the state mode of we're going to hit you first and we're going to keep hitting you and set the tone with a physical offensive line and a physical back that match. I think if and when he lands at Tulane, it's going to be a steal of the century. I think he was a power 4 back to begin with. And I think maybe it's some stuff outside of the football field, potentially in the classroom that's held him back. But, Mississippi State was involved early on and they kind of fell off. And I think it's just a matter of finding the right fit for Xavier, not if he has the skills, because he certainly does. And he's someone that we have, and I'm glad that we are talking about because he's off to such a sensational start to his senior season.
Do you, when we talk about situations like that, potentially where, maybe there's a little bit of a chance that needs to be taken from a program on a guy, whether it be, okay, we're going to take a chance on a high school guy that maybe doesn't fit the prototypical size, or we're going to take a chance on a high school guy that we're not 100% sure where they're going to be academically come signing day, or different flyers like that may be taken. Do you expect to see colleges with the new recruiting rules in terms of not having that 25-man limit on scholarships in a class and having more scholarships per year to be able to utilize? Do you expect to see some of these schools maybe a little bit more, I don't know whether you'd say aggressive or generous or flexible, to take some of those chances a little bit more readily?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't. I mean, I know that at one point for with this deep group of backs, we had talked about LSU. Would they take 3 running backs this year, especially after only taking Caden Durham a year ago? And at one point, it was looking like they were aiming to keep Harlem, James, and JT all in state and in their 2025 class. That obviously did not transpire that way, but there's no downside of trying to add someone like Xavier Ford to your class. Yeah, the academic struggles and might be there. If that's the case, we don't know that for sure. That's just kind of what you hear through the grapevine. But if he can, if you're able to get him on campus, that's the first window. And then for recruiting these days, even if he does wind up at Tulane or maybe it's UL or somewhere, Like we're talking about a kid that's a Power 4 quality back. You can get your legs under you at this level. It might open the door for you to eventually play in the SEC or the Big Ten or the ACC or wherever ultimately leads you, especially, if you have to overcome some of these, academic stuff to begin with.
Another guy in that mix of just a potential D1 guy, still, trying to gain some recruiting traction, but a guy who's been prolific throughout his high school career is one of the guys that we'll have eyes on Thursday night when we go see Dunham and Ascension Catholic. Chad Elzy Jr. for Ascension Catholic has been phenomenal for those Bulldogs throughout his high school career, put up ridiculous numbers last year, is off to a strong start to senior season. He's another guy that we had heard at different points, some level of Tulane interest. I don't know what kind of the latest is for Chad, but what are your thoughts on Chad as a running back at this point in his career and the potential of him maybe finding, hopefully a D1 home by the end of all this?
Yeah, super slippery scat back. We've seen this a time or two at Ascension Catholic, and I'm curious to hear what Lowell has to say about building an offense around Chad. The thing about Chad is he's small, but he's a scat back. So I think that's going to keep him in state, whether it's a Northwestern state or, we'll see, or whether Nichols comes through late. Could definitely see that happening. Man, he's been putting up numbers for years. I know from talking to the people over there, it was about getting him to camps and whatnot this summer. And, he's got that quickness. He's got that vision. He's got that home run, video game like production. It's just about finding the right fit. And, I think we're talking about the way that he's built. He is a scat back, so he can, it's a little bit more limited in how much you can feature him on an offense. Not to say that Ascension Catholic has taken it easy on the volume, but at the next level, as you're projecting him on Saturdays, a smaller back with home run hitting ability. So I think ultimately he will find a home. He's been talked about for, I can think of this time a year ago, people talking about Chad. He's on the radar. It's just about finding that right fit. And ultimately, I think that lends itself to a couple of the smaller in-state schools to try to scoop him up late.
Yeah, he would be somebody that would really fit the mold of what we've seen end up in some of these Nichols classes or Southeastern classes down the stretch. And he's a guy that, not exactly, but to some degree has some similarities in terms of some of the things you might say to him with some of these other backs that we've talked about, big numbers like some of these other guys, has some versatility to him where he's played all three phases for the Bulldogs during high school. And honestly, some of the early clips I saw of him that caught my attention as a young guy were on the 7-on-7 circuit and watching him catch some passes. And so he has some level of receiving skill set to his game as well. Just brings a lot to the table for the right home at the next level. And a guy that, while he may not be Jasper Parker in size, he's got some thickness to his build for sure. As a
Who is
smaller
Jasper
guy.
Parker? Who can compare to Jasper Parker? Come on.
I don't know. When you asked who Jasper Parker is, I was thinking about some of the guys that he's probably run over through the years and just their confusion of where am I? What truck just hit me? Oh, who's Jasper Park? That's sort of a moment for some of these defenders through the years. The other side, so we'll be watching Chad and that running game for Ascension Catholic and some of the things that the Bulldogs are doing on the ground in particular. The flip side is we've got a guy that we've talked about a ton on the show through the months of doing this, Elijah Haven, the 2027 quarterback, who is billed as one of the top prospects in the entire country in that class. And so this will be each of our first opportunities to see him live as a sophomore, on a Friday night. What are you
On a
looking
Thursday
forward
night.
to? Oh, Thursday night. Yeah. On a Thursday night. What are you looking forward to about this check-in with him? Obviously, some of the recruiting stuff is starting to gain some steam. He was just at LSU. He'll be at Alabama, Georgia this weekend. He's got a few other visits now lined up the rest of the way. But what do you want to see from Elijah now as a sophomore with that full season of experience under his belt last year and just kind of next steps for him?
Yeah, well, of course, we love what we saw from Elijah as a freshman at the Dunham School. I think you can kind of compare the impact that he had in year one to the same that Little Sting had when he was there, several years ago. And I think the cool thing is that Elijah's a quarterback. And we saw what he did in OT7 in his first 7-on-7 setting this summer. And then we got to see him take a huge step forward very quickly at LSU camp working for Joe Sloan. Now, this is another couple of months of more quarterback tutelage, more training, and Elijah has he has that work ethic that you are seeking in a blue chip quarterback. So I know that he's been working with Coach Weiner and as private quarterback coach. So I'm excited to see how big is the step forward. He's already broken all the records at the Dunham School, so the records are already behind him. I'd love to see what he looks like against a defense that I'm imagining is going to come full throttle to try to break up all the momentum that the Dunham School has right now. And I think that Elijah should and potentially will dominate this game. I don't know if it'll be throwing the ball. I expect he has a home run potential waiting to happen with his arm and with his mobility. So I'm expecting big plays, but I expect big plays from Elijah. What I would like to see is all those other throws, the first down throws, the move the sticks throws, when Ascension Catholic is sound in defense and coverage. What does he do? Does he lean on his legs? Is he comfortable making certain throws? This will be my first time seeing him live in a game experience. My next time might be next year. It might be as a senior. I cannot wait. But always is such a fun element to see, the off season to the live, Thursday night lights or Friday night lights, to ultimately their senior season and all the progress made in between. And like I said, Elijah has checked so many boxes away from the field that that it's gonna yield something big when we get to see him on Thursday. And this is one of the games that you and I have been talking about privately for weeks, and I'm all stoked for.
You mentioned the work ethic he has kind of behind the scenes, and this is a piece of it, but he seems to be from peripherally just such a coachable young man. And you talk about his work with quarterback trainers and with Coach Weiner or Coach Myers on the basketball court, or seeing him at that OT7, platform or whatever. And things were moving pretty fast for him, and just the way that he was interacting with some of the coaches around him, some of the older players, and just being a sponge to what was kind of thrown his way, and what could he do to better himself as a player and as a player for his respective teams. This is a matchup too that I'm looking forward to, because I actually saw this matchup on a Thursday last season, and he was fantastic in terms of some of the really positive flashes he showed. But I don't know if people outside of the actual high school world recognize that this has the potential to be a battle for these guys. It was certainly a battle last year. Ascension Catholic is a really good 1A program that took advantage of some spots too, and had some takeaways and things like that. And so watching how this matchup unfolds after last year was the way it was, and was such a close game that Elijah had to make plays down the stretch and help that team escape. I think it has the potential to be an awful lot of fun on Thursday.
Over under 64.5 points.
I think that's right in the ballpark. I don't remember. I don't remember what last year's score was. I didn't look it up. I wasn't thinking about that before we started, but I want to say it was something around like 32-31 or 32-30 or something in that neighborhood.
It kind of feels like that kind of game, like in the low to high 30s. Just feel it.
Now,
come on, I can't wait to see Lowell and see him, 4 games into his head coaching career at Ascension Catholic, the former LSU, UTSA, St. James. Great. Super excited for him. Can't wait to see him. Not so long that we were watching him on Thursday and Friday night lights.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surely excited to see him. I was just talking about the guys on the field, and I didn't know if Lowell
he might be on the field. I mean, every time I've seen him play, he's torn his ACL. So, God willing, he won't be playing. And he's super safe from the sidelines. But
we need to look. We let you guys say hello, but if that's your history and the luck or the bad luck you bring to him, we need to figure out a place to put you during the actual game and make sure.
I even had to check in with him. I was like, "You don't mind if I come, right?" Because I'm sure the ambulance will be there. But he invited me to some games when he was coaching at the OC at Columbus High School here in Texas, and I I think if he's inviting me to watch him call plays, he feels comfortable that, the ACL is in good shape, I think.
The game last season, I checked while we were talking about that, was a 29-28 Dunham win. And so a little bit shy of that over under you said. I'm going to go ahead and take the over this year. I don't remember what you said, 64.5, I think. I'll take the over.
64.5.
Maybe we get a couple more big plays by those really explosive playmakers on the respective offenses.
I hope so. I'm going to go pick up my rental lens tomorrow, my 100 to 400. I'm going to be reading the plays right off of Elijah's wristband before he calls them.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting out there. I know you are as well. You mentioned this is one we've been talking about for a few weeks. Folks should make sure to check out the Louisiana versus All Y'all channel this weekend for actually Brett McCormick will be out at Leesville versus Pineville this weekend. And so potentially have some updates from Xavier Ford this weekend. Obviously everything from this Dunham-Ascension Catholic game, keep up with everything Sam has on Rivals coming out of opportunities to chat with some of those guys. First time we'll get a chance to see Lowell as a head coach. First time Sam will see Elijah in some pads and throwing it around as a sophomore. And we'll see now Chad Elsie as a senior after watching so much of what he's done throughout his high school career. As always, Sam, thank you, man. Happy
to be here, man. And I'll have some stuff from Tyler Miller, the big LSU offensive line commit out there in Laurel, Mississippi, the Fighting Tornadoes of Laurel, as they go up against a pretty talented Oak Grove squad out there from the Berg.
Yeah, I know. I guess some of it is Damari Jefferson having come through there and just a couple of different guys here and there. But I feel like Oak Grove as a Mississippi program weirdly crosses my radar more than most Mississippi programs. And
PJ Woodland, they're well, Tristan Keys is at Hattiesburg, but a lot of LSU fans in that territory, that part of Mississippi. That's a place that this staff in particular has recruited pretty hard.
So check out all of that from Sam this weekend as well. And when we touch base again next week, we'll surely talk about more of what we saw from this weekend and probably do a little midway kind of reflection on everything we've seen from some of these Louisiana guys at that point with 4 weeks under my belt of regular season, multiple trips out this way and several games under the belt for Sam early on in Louisiana season. As always, thanks y'all for tuning in. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit Dat Boot. And until next time, y'all be well.